Buffalo, New York, November 2014. 77 inches of snow fell in 3 days. Roofs collapsed under the weight. 13 people died. The National Guard had to rescue families trapped in their homes for nearly a week. But here's what most people don't know. Some neighborhoods never recovered. Property values in the hardest-hit areas dropped 23% and still haven't bounced back a decade later. Winter storms don't just damage buildings. They destroy local economies, wipe out retirement savings, and turn thriving communities into ghost towns. These 10 American towns learned that lesson the hard way, and what happened to them could happen anywhere when the next big storm hits. Valley City sits in the Red River Valley, population about 6,500. In March 2009, a late winter blizzard dumped nearly 2 feet of snow on frozen ground, just as temperatures spiked. The snow melted in days. The Cheyenne River, normally a lazy 40 feet wide, swelled to over 18 feet above flood stage. The city built temporary levees, sandbagged like crazy, but the water kept coming. More than 400 homes flooded. Downtown businesses on Main Street sat under 3 feet of water. The estimated damage hit $68 million, according to FEMA reports from that year. For a small town, that's catastrophic. Here's what the numbers don't show. 20% of residents who evacuated never came back. Young families especially, they went to Fargo or Minneapolis and just stayed. The elementary school enrollment dropped by 140 students over the next 3 years. 3 downtown businesses that had operated for over 50 years closed permanently. Not because of the immediate flood damage, insurance covered most of that, but because the customer base disappeared. Property values took 6 years to return to pre-flood levels, and that's only if you adjust for inflation. In real terms, homeowners lost equity they never got back. California doesn't usually make winter disaster lists, but Wrightwood proves winter hits everywhere. This small mountain community in the San Gabriel Mountains, about 6,000 feet elevation, got hammered by back-to-back atmospheric rivers in January 2023. Over 10 feet of snow fell in 9 days. The town was completely cut off. Highway 2, the main route down the mountain, became impassable. No mail delivery, no food deliveries, no way out. Residents posted videos on social media showing snowdrifts up to their roof lines. The grocery store ran out of supplies. People started sharing food. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department eventually used snowcats to evacuate people with medical emergencies. It took 11 days to reopen the highway, and even then, only with escort convoys. The real damage came to the local economy. Wrightwood depends on weekend tourism, skiing, hiking, cabin rentals. The mountain resorts lost the entire peak season. The Snow Valley Mountain Resort reported a 73% revenue drop for the quarter, according to their parent company's earnings statement. Several vacation rental owners defaulted on mortgages. The property management companies that handle those rentals cut staff by 40%. 2 years later, you can still buy cabins in Wrightwood for 15 to 20% below their 2022 valuations. Buyers worry about access, insurance costs, and whether it'll happen again. Staying in California, Mammoth Lakes experienced what locals still call the Big One. January 1969 brought a series of storms that dropped 210 inches of snow in 1 month. Not for the season, for 1 month. The town's population then was only about 800 year-round residents, but it was already developing as a ski destination. The snow buried everything. Buildings collapsed. The fire station's roof caved in under the weight. The fire station. Highway 395, the only route to the outside world, closed for 3 weeks. What made this catastrophic wasn't just the snow. The Forest Service, which controlled most of the land, began questioning whether the town should exist at all. Seriously, internal Forest Service memos from 1969, later obtained through public records requests, discussed managed retreat and whether Mammoth Lakes was too dangerous for permanent settlement. That uncertainty killed development for 5 years. Banks wouldn't lend, investors pulled out. The ski resort nearly went bankrupt. Several property owners who had bought lots before the storm walked away entirely. The county seized dozens of properties for unpaid taxes. Mammoth Lakes did eventually recover and thrive, But it took a decade and new ownership at the ski resort to turn things around. Those who held onto property through the 70s eventually did well. Those who sold in 1970 or 1971 lost everything. Cordova is remote, even by Alaska standards. No roads in or out. You fly or take a ferry. Population around 2,200. The economy runs on fishing, specifically salmon and halibut. The winter of 2012 brought record snowfall. Over 240 inches fell between November and March, with the 150 inches coming in just January and February. Roofs across town collapsed. The high school gym, the community's gathering place, caved in. So did the small boat harbor office and multiple commercial buildings on Main Street. The fishing fleet was the real casualty. Boats moored at the harbor got crushed under collapsing dock structures. 27 commercial fishing vessels were damaged or destroyed, according to insurance claims filed that year. For a town of 2,200, that's a significant portion of the working fleet. Each of those boats represented a family's livelihood. A used commercial fishing boat runs $200,000 to $500,000. Most carried insurance, but insurance doesn't cover lost fishing season while you're rebuilding or replacing a vessel. The 2012 salmon season was a loss for those boat owners. The population dropped to about 1,900 by the 2020 census. Younger fishing families relocated to Juneau or even down to Washington State. Empty houses don't sell in Cordova, they just sit. The tax base shrank, which meant fewer services, which meant more people left. The Cleveland superbomb hit on January 26, 1978. Meteorologists called it an explosive cyclogenesis, a rapid pressure drop that created blizzard conditions in hours. Cleveland got hit with hurricane-force winds, sub-zero temperatures, and snow that fell so fast, visibility dropped to zero. 70 people died in Ohio alone. Thousands of cars were abandoned on highways. The Ohio National Guard mobilized. Governor Rhodes shut down the entire state for 3 days. That had never happened before. Cleveland's economy was already struggling in 1978. The steel industry was declining, population was dropping. The blizzard became the final straw for many businesses operating on thin margins. A detailed economic analysis by Case Western Reserve University, published in 1982, estimated the storm cost Cleveland $100 million in direct damages and another $300 million in lost economic activity. More than 40 businesses in Cleveland's industrial corridor filed for bankruptcy in 1978 and 1979. The storm wasn't the only reason. The economy was bad anyway, but it accelerated the decline. Workers who got laid off after their companies closed moved south or west. Between 1970 and 1980, Cleveland lost 24% of its population. The 1978 blizzard sits right in the middle of that decline. Property values in some Cleveland neighborhoods didn't recover to 1977 levels until the late 1990s. 2 full decades. If you owned a home in Cleveland in 1978 and sold it in 1985, you probably lost money even in nominal terms, before inflation. This storm hit across multiple states: Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Iowa. So it's not one town, but the destruction to small communities was unprecedented. November 11th, 1940. Armistice Day, now Veterans Day. Temperatures were in the 50s and 60s that morning. People went duck hunting in light jackets. Then the temperature dropped 50 degrees in a few hours. Winds hit 80 mph. Snow fell at rates of 2 to 3 inches per hour. The storm killed 154 people, many of them duck hunters trapped in the Mississippi River marshes. Entire flocks of ducks froze to death mid-flight and fell from the sky. Witnesses described the birds hitting the ground like hail, but the small-town destruction was economic. This was still the Depression era. Many rural Minnesota and Wisconsin towns depended on a single industry: lumber, mining, agriculture. The blizzard killed thousands of cattle and turkeys just before the holiday market. Farmers who had counted on selling Thanksgiving turkeys lost everything. According to agricultural reports from the University of Minnesota, over 27,000 turkeys died in Minnesota alone, representing about $200,000 in 1940 dollars. Adjusted for inflation, that's roughly $4.4 million today. Towns like Collegeville and Watkins, Minnesota, both lost significant portions of their poultry operations. Several farms foreclosed by spring 1941. The families left. Population in some rural Minnesota townships dropped by double digits between the 1940 and 1950 census. March 11, 1888. 50 inches of snow in New York City. Sustained winds of 45 mph with gusts over 70. Snowdrifts reached the second story of buildings. New York City completely shut down for 3 days. Over 400 people died, including 200 in New York City alone. The city had no snow removal equipment to speak of. Elevated trains froze on their tracks, stranding passengers for days. The Brooklyn Bridge became impassable. Telegraph lines snapped under the ice, cutting off communication. People suffocated in snowdrifts just trying to walk a few blocks. The economic damage was staggering for the era. The New York Stock Exchange closed for 2 days, only the second time in its history. The New York Times estimated business losses at $20 million, which would be over $600 million today. But the real impact was psychological and infrastructural. The storm exposed how vulnerable American cities were. New York immediately began planning underground subways to replace elevated trains. Telegraph and telephone companies started burying lines underground. It transformed urban planning. For smaller towns across New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, the damage was worse because they lacked resources to rebuild. Towns like Gravesend, Brooklyn, which was then a separate community, saw entire neighborhoods destroyed by fire during the blizzard. Firefighters couldn't reach the fires through the snow. Those neighborhoods were never rebuilt the same way. Property ownership maps from before and after 1888 show completely different development patterns. The 1977 blizzard is legendary in Buffalo. It actually wasn't the snow that killed the city, it was the wind. Buffalo had received heavy snow throughout January. Then on January 28th, winds kicked up to 75 millimeters. The existing snow blew into massive drifts. Visibility dropped to 0 across the entire region for 30 hours straight. 29 people died. President Carter declared a federal emergency. The Buffalo Bills had to move their playoff game to Detroit. The city was shut down for a week. Grand Island, a community of about 18,000 people connected to Buffalo by bridges, was completely cut off. The bridges were impassable. No one could get on or off the island for 5 days. A woman went into labor and had to be evacuated by helicopter. Supply trucks couldn't get through. Grocery stores ran out of milk and bread. The aftermath devastated Buffalo's already declining industrial base. Buffalo had lost the Bethlehem steel plant just a few years earlier. The blizzard seemed to confirm what people were already thinking. Why live here? The population of Buffalo dropped from 357,000 in 1977 to 328,000 by 1980, an 8% decline in 3 years. Kaisertown and Seneca Babcock, two working-class neighborhoods, were hit especially hard. Rows of houses just sat empty through the late 70s and early 80s. You could buy a house for $5,000. Problem was, there were no jobs, and another blizzard was always coming. This is recent enough that most people remember it, but the full scope of destruction is still emerging. February 13 to 17, 2021. A polar vortex pushed temperatures across Texas into single digits and below 0 in some areas. The Texas power grid, managed by ERCOT, failed catastrophically. Over 4.5 million homes lost power, many for days in freezing temperatures. 246 people died, according to the Texas Department of State Health Services, though some estimates put the real death toll over 700 when you include indirect deaths from hypothermia, carbon monoxide poisoning, and people who died because hospitals lost power. The damage exceeded $195 billion, according to AccuWeather's analysis, making it the costliest winter storm in U.S. history. But beyond the headlines, small Texas towns were devastated. Abilene, population about 125,000, went without power for over 70 hours in sub-freezing temperatures. Pipes burst across the city, homes flooded, the water treatment plant failed. The entire city had no running water for a week after power returned. Residents lined up at distribution centers for bottled water. Property damage in Abilene alone exceeded $50 million just from burst pipes and water damage. Insurance claims flooded in. Then insurance companies started dropping Texas customers or raising rates by 30–40% the following year. Homeowners who had just spent $20,000 fixing burst pipes got hit with insurance increases of $500 to $2,000 per year. Small towns like Abilene also saw a hidden economic impact. Businesses that lost inventory, grocery stores, restaurants, medical clinics with refrigerated supplies, many were underinsured for this type of loss. 8 restaurants in Abilene closed permanently in 2021. Not all directly because of Uri, but the storm accelerated decisions that were already difficult. Buffalo makes this list twice, which tells you something. The November 2014 Snowvember storm was different from 1977, but just as destructive. Lake effect snow, cold air crossing Lake Erie picking up moisture, stalled over the southern Buffalo suburbs for 3 days, 7 feet of snow. In some locations, 89 inches total. The snow fell at a rate of 4 to 5 inches per hour for periods. You could watch it pile up in real time. 13 people died, mostly from heart attacks while shoveling or from building collapses. The hardest hit areas were Lancaster, Cheektowaga, and West Seneca, southern and eastern suburbs. The New York State Thruway closed. The Buffalo Bills game was moved to Detroit, just like in 1977. The National Guard deployed. Some residents were trapped in their homes for 6 days. Over 100 roofs collapsed, including a structural collapse at the Lancaster Opera House, a historic building that had stood since 1897. Completely destroyed. 5 auto dealerships had their roofs collapse, destroying millions of dollars in inventory. The Conductor's Inn, a railroad-themed restaurant that had operated since 1945, was crushed, never reopened. But the real story is the neighborhood of South Buffalo, particularly the area around McKinley Parkway. Entire streets were buried. Homes suffered catastrophic roof collapses or were crushed under snow sliding off taller buildings next door. A University at Buffalo study published in 2017 tracked property values in the hardest hit areas. 3 years after the storm, homes in the direct impact zone were selling for 18 to 23% less than comparable homes just 3 miles north that had received half the snow. Appraisers and buyers factored in the risk. If it happened once in those specific streets, it could happen again. Some homeowners took buyouts from the state and left. The houses were demolished. There are vacant lots in Lancaster now where homes stood before November 2014. The community shrunk. 10 towns. Hundreds of years of history. Billions in damage. The pattern is always the same. The snow stops, the cameras leave, and everyone assumes life goes back to normal, but it doesn't. Not for the families who lost businesses, not for the workers who had to move away to find jobs, not for the retirees who watched their home equity disappear. Winter storms don't just hit once. They echo for decades in property values, in population decline, in local economies that never quite recover. Which raises a question worth thinking about. If you live in snow country, what's your plan when the next big one hits? And if you're looking at real estate in these areas, are you accounting for the risk that never shows up in the listing price? If this breakdown changed how you think about winter storm risk, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment telling me which of these towns surprised you most, or if you lived through any of these storms. The algorithm loves engagement, and I love hearing your stories. More deep dives into real estate risk coming next week.